here in the United States, if you can put up this next element, the Wall Street Journal broke the news that President Joe Biden is moving forward with another $1 billion in new weapons for the very military that is besieging American medical staff in Gaza at the moment, to be spent mostly on tank shells, mortars, and other offensive weapons, not just for Gaza, presumably, but also for the saber rattling that Israel is doing in the north with Lebanon. So this comes after Biden and the White House made big news by saying that they were stopping a shipment of 3,500 bombs in retaliation, basically, for Netanyahu rebuffing every American public attempt, I say public attempt rather than private attempt, to stop them from launching this Rafah invasion that is killing all of the people that Nurse Johnson just described to us. Afterwards, John Kirby said, look, Israel's getting all the weapons that it needs. I don't understand what everybody's so upset about, because we stopped this one shipment of 3,500 bombs. There were other reports that Israel was saying, look, we already have all the weapons we need to invade Rafah. Now, doesn't mean it's not a symbolic shift, perhaps, but that doesn't help the people who are going to be on the receiving end of these tank shells, I don't think.
Yeah, and so Axios has this morning as well that Netanyahu has been ranting that Israel, quote, isn't a vassal state of the United States, which,
well, yeah, we're the vassal state at this point.
So he says, according to one of his aides, he said, we are not a vassal state of the United States, according to 3 people of his remarks, with knowledge of his remarks, including one of his aides. This was on a rant in a meeting with his security cabinet. So obviously the relationship, as Axios put it here, is, quote, strained at the moment, and Biden is trying to deal with that in different ways that are amounting to, this is nothing new, but a completely inconsistent hodgepodge policy towards this war that makes absolutely no sense.
And this is what I don't get. Okay, you're not a vassal state, fine. Then arm yourself.
Well, arm yourself and don't repeatedly say over and over again that we could not fight this war without the Americans. And so if you can't fight a war that is existential, and I agree, I think this is, I think Israel faces existential threats from people around it, and we may disagree on that, but I think that's true. But Netanyahu, his security cabinet, that said the stakes of this war are existential, and we can't do it without the Americans. Well, I mean,
I think also Destiny actually, a good point that he made in that debate that we had was, it's no longer existential. That they are an industrial economy, like they're powerful enough on their own.
That American support's not existential.
That in general, like Lebanon's not going to overrun them. Hamas, with whatever 10,000 fighters it's got left, is not going to overrun them. Jordan certainly isn't in any mood to go to war with. Egypt is not invading. Saudi Arabia and the UAE just want to do business. Like their place is secure in that sense. Like it's not like 1973 where you have Arab states who are actually willing to launch a military invasion. That's over. That's done. Even without, I think, American military support anymore. And Hamas just doesn't have the potential. And the Palestinian Authority is a subcontractor of the Israeli government. So there have been many subcontractors who have kind of taken over government. So that's unlikely. Tactical vehicles, mortar shells, tank shells, all of the weapons that they're using to just annihilate Rafah, and we're going to spend $1 billion more. Nice round number.
Well, it's the same thing with the Biden administration. Do you care about what are defined internationally as war crimes or not? I mean, they care about it when it's Putin. They don't care about it. It's just, obviously, everyone knows at this point that it's bullshit. But it's the Biden administration that continues to enforce these bullshit ideas about how the war is being prosecuted and what international law is supposed to look like when it's convenient. And again, not new in American politics, not new in world politics, but to maintain that posture and to have it, informing arms shipments and very specific policy details in such an uneven and inconsistent way. Just politically, even for Biden, a disaster, let alone what it's actually doing in the war.
Yeah, and the American medical mission is an interesting proxy on this. Hind Qaudry and I, over at The Intercept, broke this news on Monday that this was happening, and it's an interesting proxy, not in the sense that American lives are inherently worth more than Palestinian lives. They aren't, and I spoke previously with Nurse Johnson, and she was saying the same thing, that she can tell just that politically that everybody just acknowledges that American lives are more valuable than Palestinian lives, including the Palestinians, that the Palestinians will say, we really hope that if you leave, that other Westerners come in and replace you, because otherwise we're all going to be slaughtered. Like we need, like those are actual human shields, like Americans shielding other civilians, because the thinking is that the IDF is not willing to kill in mass American citizens.
Right.
But that thinking is even being challenged. Like the UN convoy was fired on Monday, killing a foreign driver of that vehicle. And now they're having intense difficulty. So we broke this on Monday. Washington Post, NBC, others have since followed up reporting.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a global story at this point. People know that there are these American citizens and Canadian citizens trapped in this hospital. If Netanyahu cared, he could easily resolve this situation. They control this area. Okay, 7-minute drive from that hospital to Rafah. They control the border crossing. Monica could be out within the next hour if Netanyahu cared. And Netanyahu knows that they're trapped there, they don't have the supplies they need, that the American citizens, Canadian citizens, are themselves facing serious health complications. And instead, she's woken up by the biggest shelling that she's ever heard since being there at 6:30 this morning. He knows they're there, and they're shelling right nearby anyway. They're being told to stay away from windows. And it really does upend this assumption that your American passport or your Canadian passport gives you any protection, even as we're sending them another $1 billion in weapons.
And just as because you have more interesting reporting to talk about, but as we're wrapping this up, there are how many American hostages? About 5 American hostages that are still remaining, and barely even talk about that. But speaking of on that point, producer Max sent a tweet from Dennis Ross yesterday where he says, one thing is clear. The fact that the IDF has to go back into Jabalia and other places, and soon Khan Yunis, actually, speaking of what we were just talking about with Nurse Johnston, is a reminder that no plan existed for what would replace Hamas. Yes, Hamas is weakened, but without an alternative to it, it will fill the vacuum, and Israel needs an answer. So from the interest of the United States, the American hostages that are still being held, American aid workers that you've reported on,
being held hostage.
More
American hostages in that hospital than being held by Hamas now.
And just from the pure perspective of, again, in the interests of actual Americans over there, how has Biden handled this situation? How has the Biden administration advanced American interests in this situation? Pretty damning.
Yeah, as Biden said, if you harm an American, we'll respond.
Yeah, right.
Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.